Thank you, Chair. At first, I would like to thank OGTC for inviting me to this very important international conference. I'm quite amazed that business people like entrepreneurs, managers, all are here, and very interesting discussions in the first session we have heard. Not so much of encouraging things because of a labor-intensive industry, which is a backbone of Bangladesh's industrialization. What would be the fate of it in the coming decades would really be an issue of discussions. But it's already starting. The discussion is already started to going on there. And our Center for Policy Dialogue, it's a civil society think tank, and we are also working on it. Being a researcher, my presentation will be a little bit of a blend of research and to some extent of general observation. I'm not sure whether you will find it interesting or not. But I will not give any country, industry-specific or the farm-specific discussion, but I will give you an overview that in the course of the journey over the last 3 decades, how the industry has developed, particularly after the Rana Plaza incidents. You have all aware about it. The sector is actually passing through a transitional phase, and how it's actually going to it, and what is the future prospect through this in the discourse in the coming decade will be my focus of presentation. But definitely, the ready-made garment sector is the game changer of Bangladesh's development. In industrialization that Bangladesh is currently thinking is through the development of the ready-made garment sector particularly. And if you see the data, it also shows that how much important of the industry is in the overall manufacturing sector in terms of its contribution in the gross output, in terms of overall employment, particularly for the female employment. If you see the data, over 77% of the total female employment in the formal sector is only in this industry. So you can easily understand its importance in this context. And also in terms of the number of establishments, the large enterprises are mostly in the ready-made garment sector. It is around 76% of the total industries, factories are large, are in the ready-made garment sector. So in any sense, it's actually contributing a lot, and it has huge linkage effect, and it is also known to you as well. But for Bangladesh context, the linkage effect is quite important because it contributes to develop other industries like textiles, accessories, plastic, building materials, safety instruments, banking services, logistics services, and transport services. All these industries are also heavily dependent on the ready-made garment sector. So it's a huge linkage effect that's contributing to the growing of the economy. And that's why the economy has maintained a 6% plus growth rate over the decade. And huge employment that generated by this industry has huge contribution to reduction of the poverty. So the poverty reduction that we are actually experiencing is one of the major reasons of this industry. So it has a huge impact and implications for the country. But very strange, while we actually look back in the 1980s and onwards, there are a number of other industries are there which have an equal potentiality to grow. We considered that in the 1980s, there are industries like leather and leather goods, which have a similar footing at that time, But unfortunately, that sector didn't grow. Only one sector that has come out through this process. Why? How? This is always being a question that haunts us by the researchers. Why this happened? Why the other industries didn't grow that time? Though the facilities, though the incentive package, though the market access, which is a major important thing for growing ready-made garment sectors, is equally provided to other industries in the European market, in the US. And nowadays, even in India as well, but we didn't grow. Those industries didn't grow well. While in one hand, the ready-made garment sector total export volume is $28 billion, while the next sector, the next industries, the export volume is only just above $1 billion. So you can easily understand the difference between the two. So on the one hand, it is a strength. On the other hand, it is rather a weakness of industrialization. That's the country is actually looking for. So we need to actually diversify the industry, which we haven't yet done. But the fortunate part is that our ready-made garment sector itself big diversifying. It's every day. Those who actually have experience working in Bangladesh, I have met a number of you, and you notice that the products diversification is going on. The low-value T-shirts, those were produced in 1980s, are not produced now in Bangladesh. Those are produced elsewhere, maybe in Africa. Now more of a high-value, maybe basic items, but more of a fashionable, high-value items are being produced at the local level. So while we couldn't do the inter-sectoral diversification, but intra-R&G diversification is happening. To some extent, I would say. And some medium-end products is being growing on. The blazer, the suits, the lingerie items, those are the children wear items. Those are being recent additions in the industry. So that's happening. But still, we are dependent on imported products and imported raw materials, and the human resource part is still very weak. And we're still dependent on foreign professionals for mid-level management-related jobs. So which we try to develop, but yet we couldn't actually do it much. So there are lack of development of human resource at the internal level is a challenge there. Why this ready-made garment sector grew over time? Is it because of the policy, or is it is a blend of other things? Of course, in the early phase of development of the ready-made garment sector, definitely policy has an important contribution. But nowadays, I won't give much credit to the policy. I would rather give the much credit to the entrepreneurs. I would rather give much credit to the buyers, brands. You have just noticed that how appreciative the buyers are, the global brands are on Bangladeshi products. So that has contributed much to grow Bangladesh's ready-made garment sector. That's why my title is that policy-wise ready-made garment sector is rather implicit. You will not find that very explicitly mentioned that government is providing this and that only for the ready-made garment sector. Rather, the policy structure is such that government like to promote industries in terms of through promoting labor-intensive industries. Of course, ready-made garments is there, but of course there are other industries which are also in the same package of government's policy choice. And government also provided various kinds of incentives also, but unfortunate part is that those which are mentioned in the policy in the document are not readily available in practice. So there is a gap between policy and its actual implementation of policy. And in a recent years, some changes we particularly from our side we observe. Often, government is trying to focus more on short-term policy than on the long-term one. Though there are long-term policies are there, industrial policy, export policy, import policy order, SME policy, there are EPZ Act, there are BEPS Act, there are SEZ Act. Those are there. But more of a short-termish nature is growing in terms of implementation of policies, which we observe in every year when the national budget is announced by the government, various kinds of changes in the incentive packages because of the push and pull factor, this is happening. And one of the major area of changing policies in short-term nature is the ready-made garment sector. So it's more of a short-termish nature, which is not a good sign, I would say. With not a good sign, because long-term things are being rather not properly focused on because of the overwhelming dependence on the short-terming nature of the policy. So what I would like to say here is that the roadmap point of view, it is not a very vivid one. Maybe you have heard something, roadmap 2021. I will come to that. But very in an effective sense, the roadmap for the sector, in my sense, it is more of what government policies are there and what kinds of measures government is taking, how the private sector is reacting and what is their plan, and how the brands and buyers, which are another important agent in this process, are thinking about Bangladesh. That actually create the future roadmap of Bangladesh. So I will actually go into that part of it. Just for one line is that though theoretically FDI regime in Bangladesh is liberal, but in terms of operational point of view, I would rather say it is conservative. And more directly, in case of the ready-made garment sector, FDI regime, meaning that attracting foreign direct investment in the apparel manufacturing is not very welcoming outside EPZ. Recently, very recently, last year, government has lifted that ban. Now the foreign direct investment outside EPZ has been allowed. So it's a recent phenomenon. And we are also trying to push government that government has to come out through this very narrow sense of liberalization, rather attract foreign investments in those segments where local investors are less competitive. And there is very specific areas where local investors are not doing much good, particularly the non-cotton fabric. Maybe those who have experience in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is specialized on cotton-based fabrics, cotton-based apparel manufacturing. But in terms of the non-cotton apparel manufacturing, like synthetic, polyester, man-made fiber-based manufacturing, there is a huge global market, but our competency is rather less. So we would rather like to encourage government to invite foreign investment in those segments, like where Bangladesh has rather less competency in terms of manufacturing, or as well as in the backward linkage part. So what is the roadmap? Maybe you have heard that Bangladesh like to export $50 billion worth of apparel by 2021. This has actually come when the local leading apparel manufacturing association, BGMEA, Bangladesh Garments Manufacturers and Exporters Association, announced in their annual event that Bangladesh like to achieve 50 billion worth of apparel export when the country will reach its 50th year of anniversary in 2021. So some sorts of a political connotation between the two, but it creates a huge resonance domestically and at the outside. And we also appreciate in the sense that somehow some target at least in front of the industry, which was not earlier there. So some way it was there. But our calculation was at that time was that it was rather difficult to achieve. And finally now the situation is such that it will be impossible to achieve by 2021. But while the calculation was done, the assumption was that the export growth will be around 12%, maybe two-digit level of growth could be maintained. But I understand that India is also facing the same problem, global demand slowdown, the reduction of the price, and that has actually impacted not only Bangladesh. The data shows India, then it also affects Indonesia, except Vietnam, I would say. Most of the Cambodia also have been affected because of the global demand slowdown. So it is rather difficult to achieve by 2021 this 50 billion worth of export. If everything goes fine and if Bangladesh can achieve at least the half of the assumed growth rate, it will be not more than $42.3 billion. But even then, we are quite appreciative of taking this target by the associations, and government's policy, 7th five-year plan, has also incorporated this target in the overall export target for the ready-made garments and overall export target for a total 60 billion worth of export. So that is also in the government's policy document. But what is the weakness of this target is that no such very comprehensive discussion or no such a comprehensive action plan is being made while this discussion and while this target has been announced. What kinds of product choice, processes, technologies, which are very much critical nowadays on the human resource part, foreign investment part, there is no such proper directions that's been given in that document. So I would rather say it is not a very comprehensive one in the sense. But if we like to consider the future way out or future directions of sustainability of the ready-made garment sector, definitely we have to understand that what is going on in the ready-made garment sector nowadays in Bangladesh. In fact, from our center, we are actually at this moment conducting a survey by collecting information from the factory level. We are targeting to collect 300 factory level information. So far, 150 factories informations are available with us. But we like to see that what are the inner dynamics or what are the inner changes that is going on at the factory level at this moment. Of course, we understand that the Rana Plaza incidence is a sheer weakness in terms of the governance part, and that's why a huge number of reforms and remediation-related activities are going on. Particularly, improvement of the legislative environment. Labor Act has been amended. Factory inspections and has been conducted by Accord Alliance. You know these two organizations, private brand-led initiatives by Accord and Alliance. They have completed the initial inspections. Now they are actually reviewing the progress of remediated works. Then there are government institutions are also being upgraded. There are 2 monitoring institutions under the Department of Ministry of Labor. Those have been upgraded in terms of human resource and the monitoring initiatives. Those are also going on. And new trade unions, there is a pressure on the Bangladesh to improve the industrial relations part, particularly to allow trade union, formation of the trade union at the factory level. So those are, to some extent, at a slow pace, is gradually improving. Now, here you will see some of the progress of various kinds of remediation-related works done by Accord, who actually inspected factories, 1,620 factories they have inspected. Most of the problems identified both by Accord and Alliance are related to electrical problems, and followed up by the fire-related problems, and very less on the structural ones. So these three figures show the level of problems and the level of remediation that has been done by the factories. This greener one shows how much progress so far been done by the factories in terms of identified problems. And you see there is a good progress happen in case of the fire and the electrical part, but relatively less on the structural part. And I think you understand the difficulty of any kinds of remediation on the structural part is not so easy, and it's rather time consuming. So fire and electrical have been done at a much faster pace compared to that of the structural one. And the same information is also found in case of the Alliance-led inspected factories. Beside that, at this moment, there are factories are actually setting up safety committees at the factory level, which is comprised of the workers, and they will actually monitor day-to-day safety-related issues at the factory level. Those are also being going on there. And there is also an ILO and IFC-led initiative called Better Work Bangladesh. I think that initiative is also in other countries. So that also covers a lot. They are also focusing on a number of other issues. But still there are a number of challenges are there. Like ILO is recently pushing Bangladesh to expedite more forming of the trade unions at the factory level. And also they're also pushing to the government to make the EPZ law compatible to the labor law, because the trade union is not functionally allowed in the EPZ. So ILO is pushing government to allow trade union-related activities in the export processing zones, and also for the special economic zones, which will come in the future. So those activities are currently ongoing. But at the same time, it is also true that a number of challenges will come in the future within a decade as well, what we see. One is that Bangladesh, at this moment, Bangladesh is doing well because of its preferential market access for being a least developed country. It will be over when Bangladesh will graduate from the LDC status, and hopefully by 2024 Bangladesh will graduate from least developed country status. So in that case, this preferential market access, particularly in the European market and also in other developing countries like India, China, this will also be available the way it is now. So it will be a challenge for Bangladesh to be competitive in the coming days. The same is true for the Brexit. How and what forms of impact it would come to Bangladesh's export to Europe, which was earlier passing through ports of England. So it was not actually sure what would happen there. And there are some new competitors is emerging. I think we are actually regularly focusing how the India's apparel sector is doing. And there is a strong I would say, apprehension among the local entrepreneurs is that India in some days will take over Bangladesh's level of export. Though it is still at a very lower level, but it is said that the way India is doing, particularly in terms of having the backward linkage part, having the textiles and other things may do good in the coming days. And another thing is that politically government is found to be more favorable, this government and the just earlier government compared to the earlier decades, which may facilitate its growth path in the coming days. Not sure, maybe you may differ it. But another important point is that two big countries like India and Vietnam is now negotiating with some big countries like European Union for bilateral FTA. And definitely that would have a preference erosion for the products where Bangladesh is currently enjoying the tariff benefit. So Bangladesh is observing those developments as well, that how these big countries like India already have an FTA, have an PTA with Mercosur countries, and also have an FTA with ASEAN countries, and that has already have some impact on non-RMG products. We already noticed that. So it would have an impact and implications for Bangladesh's export if these things are going on. In fact, we are much more apprehensive before the US election that if the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, been signed by these 12 countries, that would rather will damage heavily to Bangladesh's export, because Vietnam was a partner there, and India is also negotiating for being a partner in the future. So we are a little bit was worried that, but not sure in what form in the coming days the TPP will come, or whether without USA or with USA. But definitely in the future, the preferential market access based benefit and the structure of market that Bangladesh has been enjoying will not be there. And Bangladeshi garment sector need to get prepared that they have to be competitive without having any preferential market access. So that kinds of realization started to grow in the countries, and they are started to take preparation for that. And definitely you understand that for that productivity is the major instrument. So there we need to take into focus. And also some recent issues we are observing that small factories, subcontracting factories, which were earlier can do work even in a substandard level of compliance, cannot do work nowadays. And they are not getting orders from the big brands and buyers. So there is a challenge, and we are noticing that small factories are gradually closed down. So that we are actually apprehending, that we are not actually expecting an industry where only some big players will be there, while no linkage effect or no small industries are there, which is happening in case of Pakistan. We don't actually expect that model, which rather expects some sort of a model where big factories and small factories can work joint together. And that kinds of a structure we are actually currently pushing forward. So that is there. My final part is that what should be the target and how the sector will actually target. I just actually take a target 2030. Maybe from the business point of view, it is too long, as I understand, but it has two separate meaning. This 2030 has a two separate meaning. One is that 2030 is the terminal year for implementing SDG, Sustainable Development Goal. And Bangladesh has a good track record for implementing MDG. So I think this is, and there are good targets which are related to the sector as well: employment, more sustainable production and consumption, decent employment type of thing. So it will have a good target. Another thing is that 2030 government is targeting to become a higher middle income country, meaning that per capita income they are targeted to reach at $4,300. Which is at this moment is $600 plus, $644 like that. So there is some targets there. So which has a very, very direct and close relationship with what Bangladesh is, what the ready-made garment sector is looking for. But for that, I think definitely they need to have a proper assessment of how much resources to be required, how much additional supply of electricity, port facility, transport, logistics to be there, human resource, skilled human resource management professionals, specialized personnel to be there. Then what kinds of investment in physical and social compliance to be required, and future trends of labor rights and the future growth of the industry at the local level and the international level. Those kinds of things I think need to be taken into account. Just 1 minute, maybe 2 minutes. I think for that, as I told you, is that productivity is the one major issue to be look into. So we think that in all aspects this has been actually being focusing on, and as I going forward, we have mentioned that what kinds of infrastructure to be required in terms of electricity supply, roads, ports, fire station, decentralized form of infrastructure service. Then it is also required to develop special economic zones. Then the setting up of liquefied natural gas plants to supply gas, because domestic supply of gas will soon be depleting, and by 2030 it will be almost over the existing available gas supply. So we need liquefied natural gas from abroad. So the projects are, various kinds of government projects are going on, but those are, the pace of progress is rather slow. We need to focus on workplace safety and worker rights and sustainable production. Need to train workers, management professionals and others. Need to address workers' rights much. Environmental sustainability is a very much important issue. The first session we have heard about it. The level of environmental compliance is very, very poor. So far, worker-related issues have been actually addressed, but environmental concerns have not yet been actually addressed much. I think in the coming days, this environment will be a very major issue to be looked at. Because when Bangladesh will graduate from LDC, if we want to enjoy the European Union market access, we have to comply 27 conditionalities. And out of it, environmental compliance is a major conditionality to be met at. So we think that we have to improve a lot. We are actually encouraging foreign investments, and also we are also encouraging local investors to invest abroad in the backward and the forward linkage part in the value chain. So, and also we also think that in the governance part, government institutions to be upgraded so that they could actually maintain the international standards. And we are also expecting that a common set of global standards to be maintained in terms of environmental, social, and physical infrastructural facilities. So we are hopeful that if the government and other institutions and all players actually work together, though the challenges there, but it will be possible to come out with those challenges and maintain the competitiveness in the global market. Thank you for your passion sharing.